Hi everyone, today I'm here with Dr. Pei, a local nephrologist who teaches medical students at University of California, Davis, California North State, as well as residents from Dignity. And he also has his own nephrology practice. He's been practicing for several years.
Since about 2007, yeah.
Since about 2007?
Right.
Okay. So Dr. Pei, thank you first of all for being a part of this interview today.
Thank you for having me.
And so could you briefly go over what a nephrologist is and what nephrology involves?
Nephrologist is basically the study of kidney disease and disorders, ranging from chronic kidney disease, acute kidney injury, glomerular disease. We treat patients that are on hemodialysis, peritoneal dialysis. We take care of post-transplant patients. And basically the field started off as a offshoot from endocrinology. I don't know if you're aware of that, but it started off as an offshoot from endocrinology back in the day. And there was a lot of people with renal disease, and it became its own sort of discipline that back somewhere in the 60s or so became its own subspecialty.
Nephrology is a subspecialty of internal medicine. Are there further subspecialties, or does everyone just practice nephrology?
So that's a good question. The nephrologist, there's several different types. It's evolved over the last 20 years or so, but now nephrologists can be subspecialized even in their own field. So you can be sort of like a cardiologist, you can be super specialized in different things. So with nephrology, you can become a general nephrologist, which is what I do, but we are also trained in transplant. There are physicians that are specifically trained in transplant, so and then oftentimes they work in large academic centers or centers that have a large transplant program. They handle the medical aspect of transplant, pre and post, and intraoperative medical recommendations. There's also interventional nephrology, where these nephrologists subspecialize in a field that is directly related to access-related issues regarding patients' fistulas or grafts, when they have things that they are working on, especially with patients that are on hemodialysis. So any disorders where there are poorly functioning grafts or clotted fistulas or abscesses. So they pretty much are the interventionalists, sort of like the cardiac interventionalists of our field.
So what are the most common cases in nephrology that you see?
Okay, so when you look at nephrology as an aspect, I like to break it down into looking at acute kidney injury versus chronic kidney disease. So when you're looking at the hospital standpoint, you're really looking at patients with acute kidney injury, oftentimes, that we get consulted on. These basically range from possibilities of acute kidney injury related to acute tubular necrosis, from sepsis-related issues and ranging from issues to glomerular diseases. But typically what we see in the hospital is acute kidney injury related to acute tubular necrosis. In the outpatient setting for chronic kidney disease, we see patients with all sorts of acute disorders or etiologies for their chronic conditions. But the most common condition that relates to renal disease in the outpatient setting is chronic kidney disease related to things like diabetes and hypertension. So these are some of the most common cases that we see in the outpatient setting.
What drove you to nephrology in particular?
Right, so you're going to go through as students. I mean, you're always a student, right? No matter what stage of the process that you're in your medical career, whether you're a student from medical school, then then you choose your residency, and then if you go into a subspecialty on top of that, you're always looking at being a student. When I first started it's interesting because I originally applied to be an emergency medicine resident. I went through the interview process, and then as I was going through the interview process and really seeing and thinking about what my career would be like, and this is just me, someone else's could be completely different. You're asking what drove me. When you look at the career of an emergency medicine physician from my eyes, I didn't think I could handle sort of the lifestyle, the shift work, and I really wanted to have the opportunity to sort of have this continuity of care. So that's when I switched to internal medicine during the actual interview process, and then I ended up matching at the University of Massachusetts and Worcester, Mass, at the medical school there, and ended up doing rotations there. And in the internal medicine residency, you go through your subspecialty rotations, right, as electives. And as you're going through your electives, everything sounded cool to me, right? Like, you're like, wow, this is cool. Like, at first my rotation was hematology. I was like, wow, this is awesome. My second rotation was pulmonary critical care. I'm like, wow, this is even more awesome. So everything sort of changes, right? I did a rotation in nephrology, and that was awesome also. And then I thought about lifestyle. I thought about what drives me in terms of intellectual a stimulus, and then thinking about the lifestyle of each of these different subspecialties. And what worked out for me was that nephrology was a very stimulating field in terms of the physiology of the whole disease process, the diseases that are in that field. And when you think about it, I saw an end also to a disease process. There's always a solution, in no matter what cases or fields you go into. But I actually saw an end to a disease process through kidney transplantation. And the kidney transplants are the most transplanted organs in the world. And to see that and to patient receive a new life or a second chance, and the other person at some point, whether you receive a cadaveric donor kidney or a living donor kidney, that person that gave up part of themselves is now connected to that other person forever. And it's a gift that was something that was absolutely not imaginable to me that could be given. And to see patients go from a day and night type of a life was just amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
Okay, so how is the lifestyle different in nephrology as opposed to other specialties? You mentioned it's not shift-based, which is what drew you more to that than like emergency. But are there any other lifestyle differences? Well,
so it's interesting. I think your lifestyle will be dictated based upon the group that you join. If you join a small nephrology group practice, you'll be in a situation where you'll be on call potentially every third night, every third weekend. But if you join a larger group, your call could potentially be less. So in terms of that as a lifestyle, it all depends upon what group you join. But in terms of the patient relationship, the lifestyle that you have with the patients, the relationship of you seeing them from when they're in a chronic kidney disease situation, going through the process of going on dialysis, whether it's home dialysis or in-center dialysis, and then potentially receiving a kidney transplant, and seeing that whole process and the stages that people go through. That in and of itself gave me enough to say that this is the field that I wanted to go into.
Okay, and could you walk us through like a typical day in your life from when you come in to when you leave usually?
Okay, so my day is going to be a little unusual. So I'm married, I've got 2 kids, and in order to do things that I want to do, and if you can see my room, there's a lot of things I like to do. I like to go run, I like to ride, I like a lot of different things. My typical day starts at about 4:30. I get up, I go run for about an hour and a half with the dog, around 5-ish, 5:30-ish. Then I get up, I'm out of that house by about 7, it's between 7 and 7:30. I go around at the dialysis clinic, typically. Then I will come to the office, see patients here, go back to the dialysis clinic again, see more patients for the second shift, and then come back and see patients in the afternoon, and then finish up the day at the dialysis clinic. And then go pick up my son or my daughter, depending upon what sports day it is. That'll be 1 week. The other time, my practice is based upon 1 week in the office, 1 week in the hospital. The second week I'll be in the hospital, where I'll sort of do the same thing, but instead of being in the office, I'll be in the hospital and see hospital things. So that's pretty much how that works. And in terms of being on call, overnight call or answering phones, during the weekdays I'm on call one every about 2 weeks, weeknights, and then on the weekends probably about one in every between 4 to 6 weekends. I'm on call.
You get in around 7, and
I start the day around 7.
Okay, and when do you leave usually?
So I usually leave here around 5:30 or so. But if it's a day where I know it's going to be a later day, it could be up to 7 or so. But I think it's pretty reasonable. At least I get to do the things that I want to do, right?
Okay, and how often do you have to take charting home or things like that?
So with the electronic medical record system, it a lot of times, because there's so many different parts of the practice, I might not be able to get the work done here all the time. So I would say during the weekdays that I'm in the office, that's when I really have a lot of outpatient charting and stuff to do. That I would say during that week, pretty much every night I've got about an hour after work or so of outpatient charting to finish up. During the weeks that I'm in the hospital, there's no outpatient charting there, because it's all the hospital, and I just do the charting right in the hospital.
What's the most rewarding aspect of nephrology?
I think the most rewarding aspect is seeing patients succeed at whatever their desires are to succeed at. Seeing whether it's to get a kidney transplant, where it is to see the person live long enough to get them to the stage where they can see their kids or their grandkids get married, or these things. The medicine will always be there. The science behind all medicine will be there, but it's just the people that you deal with, and the emotions and the friendships and the relationships that you have that seems to be, in general, to me, the most rewarding thing about practicing in general.
And what's the most challenging aspect of nephrology?
So the most probably challenging aspect of nephrology is, I think the most challenging thing of any career, not just nephrology or just anything, is just trying to keep the constant stimulus going and making it every year better than the year before for you, more enjoyable. Like for me, being able to pass on knowledge to like students like yourself or residents and that type of thing, or constantly involving myself in some type of educational activity or teaching activity, makes it really enjoyable. Otherwise, for me, it just becomes a day in and day out type of situation, and it really, for me at least, doesn't become fun. It's, I like the aspect of having variety in not just what I do in medicine, but outside as well.
What types of practice settings can nephrologists work in? Is there a lot of private, independent, contractor opportunities or locum tenens work, or are they mostly big groups?
I think it all depends upon which state you practice in. In California, hospitals are not allowed to hire nephrologists directly, or not nephrologists, but physicians directly. So in California, you can there's two different things that you can go into. Just like in every other state, you can go into an employed model where you're hired by a group, and that group will go ahead and contract with hospitals to manage or fund you. Or the other aspect is to also be private, like in the group that I'm in right now. It really sort of depends upon what you like. The locums is also available also. I've seen a lot of job opportunities for locum tenens, and that's also available as well. There's a lot of people that look for nephrologists to do some work. There's a big need in Hawaii right now, so if you're interested in Hawaii and you want to do nephrology, you can go over there. But yeah, locums are available, private practice, the whole gamut is there, just available for people.
How well are nephrologists compensated, and what tips would you give us if we go into nephrology to maximize our compensation or our financial situation?
So I think it really depends upon what you are looking for. If you work hard, I think a lot of the data that you're asking about you can see online, in terms of the national average. When you go into the Midwest, places there's a huge need, the compensation will definitely be more. I think that the best answer that I can give you in terms of compensation is that as a physician, this is the best job you're going to ever have. I think it's such an honor to be and to do what we do. We're pretty much like the mechanics the mechanic works on cars. They diagnose, they get a problem, they fix a disease process or an issue. We're sort of the mechanics of the human body, right? But it's such an honor to be able to, and a privilege to do what we're doing and as a physician in the U.S., you're going to get compensated well enough, and you're going to do well, no matter what it is. If you work hard, you're going to make more money, but it's potentially you could sacrifice time, right? And time, as you get older, you're going to understand, and you will know that it becomes really important, right? Are you willing to sacrifice the time to work harder to earn more money and miss your son's soccer game or miss your daughter's water polo game? Well, when I think about compensation, that type of stuff is also compensation as well. And that type of things, the moments that you have with your family, your friends, and these types of things, that's stuff that money really can't buy you, right? That'll never go back, because at the end of your life, the only thing that you have is your memories, right? And those moments that you see your kids grow up, or you see that friend or whatever it is, right? So, like I said, I think from a compensation standpoint, you can look at the national average. You can Google it. Everyone's got Google. You work hard, you're gonna do very well. You're gonna make a lot of money, no matter what field you're in. Certainly, when you look at compensation from a nephrology standpoint, we're probably somewhere between a gastroenterologist and an internal medicine doc. But if you look at the whole scope of things, I think compensation and the rewards that you get when you're talking about compensation, there's different things that what compensation means. But so yeah, you can work hard and you can do well, but you will sacrifice. What I can tell the students, that this is for the students, right? That sometimes the compensation can't buy you the memories and the moments that you have. So, but it's a balance, right?
Since the field of medicine is changing so quickly, how would you recommend people, or how do you stay on top of all the advances in your field? So
there's so much information that is out there. Typically, the societies that you join when you're in your subspecialty or in your specialty field or whatever field you go into, you'll have a certain society that will provide you recommendations. So for nephrology, there's the American Board of Internal Medicine. There's also the American College of Physicians, which are all internal medicine-based organizations. And for nephrology, there's two main organizations in the U.S., the American Society of Nephrology, the National Kidney Foundation, and also a third one that's more international is the KDIGO group, which provides guidelines through the international-based, or it's an international-based organization that provides guidelines. For me, I look at most of the journals that are in those specific fields, and I try to keep up as much as I can. I try to do at least every year for my specialty for nephrology. I try to go through the American Society of Nephrology board review every year and just go through the highlights in that, along with whatever comes in through the email and information that comes through there. Usually, if you join those organizations, you'll see a lot of emails that provide updates on information.
What tips would you give medical students to match into a good internal medicine residency and a good nephrology fellowship?
So for internal medicine, I think that whatever I'm not sure how competitive the field is now, but I think there's enough spots that are out there that if you were to get interviews at the choices that you want to go into, it's a good chance that you're going to get into one of those places. For nephrology, I think it's really important, depending upon where you want to go. If you want to go to a community-based program, I think if you just did a couple of rotations, had good recommendations, that's enough. But if you wanted to go into a more high-powered residency program, I call them high-powered because more when I'm thinking of like Ivy Leagues or anything like that, they do like to see things like research and more than just doing a rotation, and there are good letters of recommendations. I think shadowing is great if you can do that. I don't think that it would help you very much if you did it as a medical school student now, but certainly if that's something that you were really interested in, knew that you wanted to go into, I think if you found every opportunity to get into research or community-based organizations, I think that's great. I mean, if someone was wanting to go into nephrology and they knew as a medical student where to go, or even as a resident, I would search the American Society of Nephrology or National Kidney Foundation websites and get contacts through them and find out what volunteer positions were available.
Are there certain personalities that do best in nephrology?
I think anyone can do well in it if you have the desire, if that's what you wanted to do.
Okay. You mentioned there's other types of compensation. How would you recommend, or how do you even prevent burnout? It seems you do a lot of things.
Right.
And how do you establish a work-life balance?
So looking at work-life balance, it completely depends. You know, if you're single versus married, if you're married, you really have to work it out with your other half and make sure that there's an understanding of being able to do the things that you want to do. If you're not married, then you can pretty much do whatever you want. But what I would say is to have a good work-life balance, you just have to be able to figure out what you like to do and put the time in for that and fight for that time. You know, medicine will always be there, but certain events or things that you want to do outside of medicine will not always be there. So I think that you should definitely have the fight or the desire to go ahead and get the time that you need to do the things that you want to do. You know that whole thing, that little saying, it's a marathon and not a sprint, right? So that's what life is, and that's what medicine is in general. But to create a good work-life balance, to keep the constant stimulation going, you know, there's so many opportunities that are out there to go ahead and volunteer in your community. I used to do a lot of volunteer work over at UC Davis, the free medical clinic at the Paul Hahn Clinic. So that provided another area where I found satisfaction doing clinical rotations with California North State students, having the PA nurse practitioner program at UC Davis come in and rotate with me, along with teaching residents at the family health practice at Dignity has really provided a lot of stimulus for me and enjoyment, actually, seeing the students read about something or talk about something with them, and then, you know, when you see that light bulb going on and they get it, it's just an awesome feeling, you know. So.
Okay, so if you could go back, would you do the same career path over again? Yeah,
I would definitely. I wouldn't change a thing. I actually wasn't going into medicine. I was actually started out as a podiatry student in San Francisco.
How did you end up going to?
So I knew that I didn't want to do any surgery, and podiatry, you know, did seem more interesting if you did surgery. I knew I wasn't going to be a good surgeon no matter what, and so. Because of that, one of my friends said, "Hey, you know, there's a school in the Caribbean. Why don't you apply for that? It's called St. George." And I'm like, "Okay." And so I applied. I got in, and that's sort of what happened. So I spent 2 of my years in the Caribbean, and it was the best time of my life. I mean, how can you beat going to medical school in the Caribbean, right?
Yeah. Since you went to the Caribbean for medical school, I've heard sometimes it could be hard to get a residency spot in the U.S.
Right.
When you're applying. What tips would you recommend for doing that?
Okay, so for the Caribbean schools or any school that you're going into, like a brand new medical school, there's not a lot that's known about the students or anything like that. The one sort of common factor that everyone has to go through is what? Your steps, right? So you have to do well in your steps. So if you do well in your step 1 and step 2, then no matter what residency that you're looking for, you're going to have a good chance at getting. You know, there is, I believe, some, they're weighted differently. Someone coming out from an Ivy League school, whether East Coast or West Coast, versus someone coming from my medical school may have sort of this added advantage just by the name itself. But I think if you get an interview and you're in that process, I think you can shine. You can definitely wow your interviewers and stuff like that. So it really, getting your foot in the door is a big thing, and I think the one common score or standard that you can do well on to get your foot in the door is doing well on your steps.
And last question, what tips would you give us to become good doctors?
I think the biggest thing is that patients do not always follow what the books say. Listen to your patient. Don't have an ego. And really just have a relationship, have a bond with them, and just listen to them. I think that would be the greatest lesson that I've learned during this whole time, is just to enjoy them, enjoy the patients, have that relationship, and just have fun.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Pei, for being with us today. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, let me know, and we'll get back to you. Thanks again for watching, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.